Picture this: a tower so despised that nearly 300 artists, writers, and musicians signed a petition demanding it be torn down before it was even finished. They called it a monstrosity, a truly tragic street lamp. One famous writer reportedly ate lunch inside it every single day, not because he loved the view, but because it was the only place in Paris where he couldn't see the tower itself. And yet, today, that same monstrosity welcomes millions of people every year. It glitters over the Seine at night. It's stamped on postcards, keychains, movie posters, and the dreams of anyone who's ever imagined standing in Paris. So what happened? How did the most hated structure in France become its most beloved symbol? That's the story we're telling today. Here's something most people don't know. The tower wasn't even supposed to be permanent. It was built for a party, a massive World's Fair in 1889, celebrating 100 years since the French Revolution. The plan was simple: build something spectacular, dazzle the world for a few years, and then tear it down. 20 years, and that was it: demolition. Another surprising fact: the man whose name it carries almost didn't design it. Gustave Eiffel gets all the credit, but the original sketch came from two engineers working quietly inside his company, Maurice Coquelin and Émile Nouguier. When Eiffel first saw Coquelin's drawing, he wasn't impressed. He actually rejected it, told him to make it more elegant, more graceful. So they brought in an architect, added those sweeping arches near the base, and only then did Eiffel put his name behind it. Here's one more thing to sit with before we go further. Over 18,000 individual metal parts, more than 2.5 million rivets. Every single piece designed to a precision of 1/10 of a millimeter, thinner than a human hair, before a single beam ever left the factory. And it all came together in just 2 years, 2 months, and 5 days. No modern cranes, no computers, just men, ropes, and an obsessive kind of genius. Now, let's rewind. Let's go back to a cold January morning in 1887, when Paris was still a city that had no idea what was about to rise from its heart. It's the 26th of January, 1887. On the Champ de Mars, a patch of open ground in the middle of Paris, workers begin to dig. 4 enormous pits, spaced out like the corners of a giant square. Nobody watching that morning could have imagined that within 2 years, this quiet field would hold the tallest structure human hands had ever built. The ground itself fought back almost immediately. Near the Seine, the soil was soft, waterlogged, unstable. So the engineers did something almost unthinkable for the time. They used compressed air chambers to sink foundations 15 meters underground, working below the water table itself. It was slow, it was dangerous, but it held. Then came the real challenge: assembling 250,000 rivets, thousands of iron beams, into something that had never existed before. Picture the factory just outside Paris, the clang of hammers, sparks flying, 50 engineers hunched over more than 5,000 drawings, each piece numbered, each angle calculated so precisely that when the beams finally arrived on site, they simply had to fit. There was no room for improvisation 400 feet in the air. And that's exactly where the real drama unfolded. Because up there, on narrow platforms with no safety harnesses, no hard hats, nothing but balance and nerve, somewhere between 150 and 300 men climbed higher every week. 4 workers to a rivet, 1 heating it red hot in a furnace on the ground, 1 carrying it up in tongs, 1 holding it in place, 1 hammering it home before it cooled. Thousands of times a day, and remarkably, through the entire construction, only 1 worker lost his life, a number so low for the era that it was almost as astonishing as the tower itself. By the time the first floor was completed in April of 1888, Parisians could already see this strange iron giant taking shape over their rooftops. And that's when the outrage really began. Painters said it would ruin the skyline forever. Writers called it an insult to the city's beauty. A furious letter, signed by nearly 300 of France's most celebrated artists, was published in a major newspaper, begging the government to stop construction before, in their words, Paris was disfigured forever. But Gustave Eiffel didn't stop. He didn't even slow down. On the 31st of March, 1889, 2 years, 2 months, and 5 days after that first shovel hit the ground, Eiffel climbed all 1,710 steps to the very top himself. He raised the French flag over Paris and looked down at a city that, only weeks earlier, had wanted him to fail. Then, something remarkable happened. The public didn't hate it. They adored it. Within months, nearly 2 million people had climbed the tower during the World's Fair alone. Long queues wrapped around its iron legs. Suddenly, this temporary monstrosity was the single most talked about attraction on Earth. But remember, it still had an expiration date. 20 years, then demolition. And as that deadline crept closer, Eiffel grew desperate to save his creation. So he did something clever. He turned his tower into a laboratory. He funded experiments in meteorology, gravity, aerodynamics, anything to prove the tower had scientific value beyond its beauty. Still, none of that would have been enough. What actually saved the Eiffel Tower was something nobody had planned for at all: radio. As wireless communication became crucial for the military, engineers realized this iron giant was the perfect antenna, the tallest structure in the world, standing right in the heart of Paris. During the First World War, it intercepted enemy transmissions. It helped relay crucial signals across France. Almost overnight, the tower stopped being a decoration and became a necessity. The demolition order was quietly forgotten. From that point on, the Eiffel Tower's story became one of endurance. It survived 2 world wars. It watched Nazi soldiers march beneath it, and legend says that when Hitler ordered the tower destroyed as Allied forces approached Paris, the German commander in charge simply refused. It survived changing tastes, changing centuries, changing ideas of what beauty even means. Today, it isn't hated, it isn't questioned. It stands more than 1,000 feet tall, lit gold every evening, watched by millions who travel from every corner of the world just to stand beneath it and look up. The tower that Paris once begged to tear down became the very thing that makes Paris, Paris. There's something quietly powerful in the fact that the Eiffel Tower was never supposed to last. It was mocked, rejected, scheduled for destruction, and yet it became eternal. Not because it was perfect from the start, but because someone refused to let early judgment decide its ending. Gustave Eiffel didn't argue with his critics. He just kept building, kept adjusting, kept finding new reasons for his creation to matter. That's really the heart of this story. Nothing valuable arrives finished. It arrives fragile, criticized, uncertain, and it's shaped into something lasting only through patience and quiet persistence. If you're learning English, you already know this feeling. Some days, your sentences feel like that first shaky iron beam, awkward, unstable, not quite fitting together. People might not understand you right away. You might feel, like Eiffel once did, surrounded by doubt. But every rivet matters. Every word you practice, every conversation you attempt, every mistake you correct is another piece bolted into place. You don't need to speak perfectly today. You need to keep showing up the way those workers climbed higher every single morning, without safety nets, trusting that the structure would eventually hold. One day, the language that once felt foreign and impossible will feel like home. Not because it became easy, but because you never stopped building. So keep going. Keep listening to stories like this one. Keep chasing new words. Keep letting curiosity pull you forward. Because somewhere ahead, your own tower is still rising, one patient rivet at a time.